I just wanted to re-emphasize how much I like this teepee and why I would run it in sil nylon, even though I love Cuban fiber. I just showed you these rafters. I just showed you the load it can carry, the shape of it, how solid it is in the wind, the guy out options, how easy it is to set up, the multiple door options. There's just so many things about this shelter that are its design that I'm willing to forego the Cuban fiber fabric in a heartbeat. There's just nothing out there right now that is like this, especially with how you hunt, you get wet, and your stuff gets soaked and you need to dry it out, which is the brilliance, the genius of having a fire inside a shelter. It's lightweight because it's a teepee and there is no floor, and you save tons of weight. The doors, I want to talk about that. 2 doors instead of 1. 2 instead of 1. That's so critical because when I shut this door, let's say this zipper does fail, and that has happened. We have not on Peax shelters. I haven't had one fail, but I have had zippers fail on other teepees. When that happens and you only have 1 door, you're screwed. You're digging a foxhole like underneath the wall and it's 0 degrees outside, or it takes hours to get the zipper shut. You end up having to sew it or duct tape it to try to keep it shut. And then you have no in and out. You have to sort of crawl under it, pull up a stake, and it's shimmy. It's a mess. This, having 2 doors, which I always recommend in a shelter, especially if you're getting dropped in Alaska or something. If this zipper were to fail, I can duct tape it and I can sew it shut. I can use some sewing, and I can, in a desperate moment, I can do a little bit of all of it. It depends on how bad the zipper failure is. And I can get 1 door shut, and I can still use the backup zip, the 1 door for getting in and out. So yeah, 2 is 1, 1 is none. So love that. Let's talk about fire and stoves. Now, I had mentioned before, I was going to sleep with my head on this end, and the stove would therefore be on that end. And let me kind of briefly show this to you. I would lay down like this, okay? My stove jack is right here. That puts my stove right here. That puts my wood right here. What I like about this 2-door setup is we've been in this situation where with the other shelter, we have to crawl inside. First of all, if you put your wood right in front of the door and you have 1 door, now you have to climb over the wood to get into your shelter every time you need to get in. And a giant stockpile of wood inside your shelter isn't for just convenience. It's to dry out the wood. Often the wood is wet. So the bigger the pile you can put in here on day 1, if you plan to stay there for 4 or 5 days, the more that wood continues to dry out as it's in this warm tent, right? So we often stack a massive pile of wood. And if you're Ryan Lampers, you stack a big pile just because you like to hoard wood and have lots of it on hand and then leave it behind. But preppers are like that. So hippie preppers. So big pile of wood ends up here, ends up in front of your door, and you have to navigate around it. It's a pain. Or you have to take your wood and cart it to the back of the shelter and stack it in the back so that your door doesn't have a pile of wood in front of it. But then you have to go over your sleeping bag and your pad and all your stuff and like add more wood throughout the hunt back in here. It's a pain to get it there. With this design, you open this door. Stove is set up right here, titanium stove. We like the SXL for cold, the Seek Outside SXL. It's pretty sweet. Brad really has been a big fan of the light outdoors. 18 inch, 16?
They have 18, 12 and 18, and then they have a larger one as well.
He liked the 18. We haven't tested them. I know that the SXL has been money in this shelter. You use the 18 light, and you liked it more. So I still have to try the light outdoors 18 inch. Haven't tried it yet. Those are 2 that we've tested though. Brad, one, and all of us have used the SXL a lot. When it's colder, sure, we'll go with like a large stove instead of a SXL. But when we're with 2 guys, we often still bring the SXL because that little extra ounce, I mean, having that firepower can be big time important. Now, if it's really early in the season, we may not even turn the stove on, spring or something. And we usually do just bring a large or something. But anyway, Stove size does make a difference once you get later into the season, and we just prefer to go big or go home with the stove. You bring in all this, you might as well bring a few extra ounces in weight and just really be able to cook this teepee. So your stove is here, pile of wood is here. We just take the zipper, undo it, and just stack the wood. It's great. And then we just zip it shut, and then we can come in from this side of the teepee to get inside of our sleeping bags, and there's no pile of wood in our way. And we didn't have to cart the wood through the shelter to the other side. That is the benefit of 2 doors. The benefit of sleeping on this side of the shelter and that side of the shelter gives both doors you can get in and out of. When you unzip it, you're not underneath the door getting wet. Okay, you're off to the side. When you start your stove, you like to have it kind of right here where I can reach it. We usually use S-bit for fire starter nowadays. It's cheap. You can buy it on anywhere, really. Super inexpensive. It works great. We'll throw that into the stove. We'll throw our little piece of wood in, get a stove going. We talk about stove and drafting and getting the pipe right and all that on another show. But needless to say, we get the stove going hot. It's all right here. Now, the one thing about a floorless shelter that's inevitable, especially when it's super cold, you go to bed at night, let's say it's 80 degrees in here and you're drying out gear and it is just storming outside. It's icy, cold, wet. It's 10 degrees, right? We're in our sleeping bags, but inside it's cozy 75. We fall asleep. We often let the fire burn out. You don't have to. Some guys don't. They like to wake up, put a little more wood in there, whatever, keep the whole tent nice and comfy. We're mountain men. Right, Brad? We're mountain men. So we're lazy. We're lazy. So we tuck into our sleeping bags. We crash. We fall asleep. We let the fire burn out. We sleep through the night. 0 degrees, -10. We just crash. When we wake up in the morning, our mouth, the heat from our mouth, the condensation, the heat inside quickly diminishing, that temperature change in a quick fashion from hot to cold, condensation gathers on the sidewalls, and then it'll freeze even. And the whole wall will be ice covered. The whole tent will be ice covered. People freak out. We don't care. We get here, we get the stove going in the morning, and we lit that stove, and we get it like 80 degrees, roaring hot. This is also why we like the SXL or similar size stove. I like the SXL because it's short. You don't need height in a stove. You need width for more surface area to burn. Spreads out the fire. I like the big pipe because it drafts better, sucks more air. It's just like any gas engine. The more oxygen you can give it, the more turbocharged you can make the fuel burn. So I like it. We get this thing going super hot. What happens? All that ice melts. And literally we'll be covering our heads as it is raining in here like the Amazon rainforest. Just raining. And we tuck in and everything gets wet for just a few minutes. And then 20, 30 minutes later, it's still dark outside. It's like 4 a.m., 5 a.m., whatever it is, depends on the season. It dries out. Everything gets bone dry. By the time we get out of our tents to go outside, keep in mind, my boots are in the rafters. They got a little fan in them. They're warm and supple. They're not ice, rock hard, frozen, or wet from the sweat from the day before. I step outside. I put on a pair of boots that are nice and comfy, that like these Crispy Laponia 2.0, my favorite boot. But I'll put this boot on and it'll feel just like it feels right now. It's supple. And then I can step outside and right away my feet are already warm before the day even begins. I will say on those late season hunts, I tend to bring the Wild Rock Plus, actually, with like superpower levels of insulation and warmth. But anyway, the idea is, who cares about condensation? If you have fire, it doesn't matter. And then everything dries out rather quickly. And by the time we leave the shelter, the whole shelter's warm and dry inside. All right. I hope you enjoyed that. What you guys just watched was a short clip of a 50-minute long podcast episode, number 806. If you'd like to watch the entire episode, click the link below. You can find it there. Thanks for tuning in and stay gritty.